And we're live. Okay, welcome and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is Thursday, the 1st of April. So happy April Fool's Day. Okay, so welcome. Tonight, we're going to be talking about money, right? So it'll be an interesting topic. Let me just adjust the camera. Okay, so tonight we're talking about the we're going to talk about money. Okay, so just doing a quick mic test. Or can anyone hear me? Can you hear me loud and clear? Please just let me know that you can. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Okay, yeah, so good evening. It's Thursday, the 1st of April, 2021, broadcasting live to you from Malaysia. Okay, so doing a mic test. Please let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. If you can, please just put it in the comment section below. Okay, Peachin, thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. Okay, so if you're new, welcome. If you are not, then welcome back. Okay, if you're here, please don't forget to share this video. So this is live streaming right now. So please share it with your friends and family who may be interested in this topic. So just tag them in the comment section below so that they'll get notified on their mobile device. If you're watching this on YouTube, click on the bell icon, right? Choose all, so that the next time we go live again, you get a notification and you can come on. Okay. Obviously, if you're on Facebook, follow us. If you're tuning in from Twitch, also follow us. Okay. Like I said, tag your friends, tag your family who may or may not be interested in this topic, and they might be interested in this topic after hearing about it. As usual, please feel free to throw in your questions as I go through the presentation. Any questions that come to mind, right? There are no silly questions. Just put that in the comment section below, and I'll get to it, and I'll answer you either in the middle of the presentation, or or I'll just answer it at the end of the presentation, right? Okay. So apparently, if you're tuning in on Facebook, there's actually like a new thing called stars, right? And so you can send stars to us. This is kind of cool. So if you're tuning in, look, if you like the content that we're producing, try to send us some stars and see what happens. I'm not really too sure, but let's experiment, right? Because in future proof, that's what we try to do. We keep experimenting and we try to figure out where all this technological innovation is heading to. Okay, so yeah, so check out this stars. If you're tuning in from Facebook, they have this new feature that they've switched on called stars. So you can apparently you can send us stars. So send us some stars if you like the content. All right, and let's see what happens. Okay. Let's see. Tonight, yeah, we're talking about money. Any announcements? Yes, we have some announcements. We are starting our crypto classes up again. We're firing that up. We didn't have that last year because last year was pandemic year, and it was lockdown year. Everyone was locked down. But we are starting them again. So if you are interested in coming for a class, put it in the comment section below. Just say class, right? And someone from the team will reach out to you. If you are thinking, perhaps looking into diversifying your existing investment portfolio and having some of that in crypto, then my best advice would be, and this is not financial advice, my best advice is for you to understand what you might be going into, what you might be putting your money into, and I think that's a good investment. Right? Invest in yourself so that you know what you're investing into, and therefore, because crypto is a pretty volatile asset class, and so every time it has these crazy swings, you're not going to lose your mind because you know what you're getting into. So I think, if anything, do come for class, right? Okay, so let's see. And the classes will be conducted we're looking to conduct classes in May. So feel free to join us if you're free then. Okay, and I think, don't quote me on this, that it'll be the May 7th to 9th, I believe. So yeah, if you're interested in classes, do type in class in the comment section below. Okay, now let's see. Any recaps? Last week we spoke about NFTs. For those of you who did not join us, NFTs stand for non-fungible tokens. And we talked about the current use cases that we are seeing. And also at the end, we covered the potential use cases for NFTs. Okay, so now let me just share my screen so that we can jump right into tonight's presentation. Okay, here we are. Now let me know if you can see my screen. Looks to be okay. Okay, I'm just gonna present. Okay. All right, so how's that looking, folks? You can see it, well? Okay, good. Okay, I see a few more people joining us. Good evening and welcome. Welcome, everyone. Now, so tonight we're going to be talking about money. All right, we're gonna take a journey actually we're going to be looking at money systems. Let's look at the past, look at where we are today, and then what could possibly be in future. Okay, so as usual, this is not financial advice, so please do not take it as so. Tonight, this is for informational purposes only. This is just an information sharing session on the topic. So if you are planning to make any investment decisions, please consult with a financial professional, right? So this, whatever we talk about tonight is not financial advice. So please don't take it as so. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let's go. Now, for those of you who are just joining us tonight, look, we are EquitiesTracker, and we have a website, EquitiesTracker.com. Do have a, do jump on and try us out, right? So we believe in a data-driven approach when it comes to making informed investment decisions, and that's how we approach everything that we do. So yeah, look, do come on, have a free trial, and if you're feeling generous, support us by signing up, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, so now take a look at this picture, right, on the left. It's a picture of the FBC Bank in Harare, Zimbabwe. You can see there's an extremely long line there. Look, it's either a bank run or a very inefficient banking system, right? Now, before money ever existed, people used to barter for stuff, right? We used to exchange, look, I'll give you half a chicken for, half for, two, I don't know, 2 pots or something like that, right? So that was how the bartering system worked before the concept of money was available. People used to exchange stuff. Now, this form of bartering or payment is thought to have existed about 9,000 BC, so around 11,000 years ago. But do you know that today, right? So many years have passed, and obviously we feel that we're using money to pay for stuff, but in countries like Zimbabwe and Argentina, bartering still exists. It still exists, I suppose, for a number of reasons. And if you look at the chart on the right over here, right, what you see is that that's the inflation rate of Zimbabwe, right? From around the beginning of 2000s, right, and up to about 2007, you can see that the inflation rate in Zimbabwe had gone up 24,000%. Yes, that's right. You heard me right. 24,000%, and that's pretty crazy. From in 2008, 2009, no more information is available on that. But you could see that the inflation rate has gone nuts. Now, okay, so that right, there's no figures for 2008 or 2009, but numbers from the Zimbabwe Central Bank showed the annual inflation rate reach around 231 million% in July of 2008. Now that is just mind-boggling, right? 231 million% as the annual inflation rate. That means if you were holding the national currency, it would be worth nothing effectively, right? Um, and the officials gave up reporting the monthly statistics when it peaked at just under 80 million% in mid-November 2008. So the country was effectively forced to abandon their own currency a year later, right, at the rate of Zimbabwe dollar of 35 quadrillion to $1. So that's just unfathomable, right? But it did happen, and it happened. And so there are let's just share a bit more about Zimbabwe, right? So at the Zimbabwe hospital, patients basically still, obviously you still have to pay, right, for services. So they pay for the medical expenses with animals and peanuts, right? And if you see this list here, if it's clear enough and you can read it, right, that's the US dollar equivalent on the right, and on the left are the things that you can barter with, that you can pay with, right? So sunflower seeds, right? A bucket of sunflower seeds is the equivalent of $2. A bucket of soybeans, equivalent of $3. You've got sugar beans, equivalent of $10. Peanuts, the equivalent of $4, right? You've got goats, turkey, sheep, right? So this is how things are paid for in Zimbabwe, right? And this is a picture of the Chidamoyo Hospital Chapel, right? So well, it's a hospital, and that's the chapel, and that's been turned into a storeroom for peanuts and the other bartered farm produce in Zimbabwe. So there's this lady here that you can see. She's bringing in a plastic bag of something to pay for her bills. So it's. I mean, you would think that in modern day society that we live in an economy that we live in today, that this was no longer, and there wasn't such an issue. But look, it does happen. So here's the lesson there, right? If nobody wants your money, it's worthless. It's as good as worthless. So money is so as long as everybody agrees that, hey, look, that US dollar, I want it because it's worth something, then it is not worthless. It is worth something. Okay. So mutual acceptance of a means of payment, whether it's gold, chicken, peanuts, or cash, right, is key to a successful transaction. As a means of payment, right, gets more widely accepted, the entire payment system becomes more valuable, right? So that the payment system becomes very valuable. Now, currently, thanks to America's political and economic influence, the US dollar is used as the main currency for debt issuance, invoicing, and payments. Now, if you look at that chart on the left, this pie chart here, right? The dollar makes up about 60% of all global central banks' reserves. Now, I'm sure you've all heard that, the US dollar is the global reserve currency. Well, it is, and so are the other currencies like the euro, the pound sterling, the Australian dollar, the renminbi, right? Swiss francs, Canadian dollars, and some Japanese yen, right? These are the really famous ones, and then there's some, combination of other currencies. But effectively, most of the central banks around the world will store very much so the US dollars as a global reserve bank currency. And if you're tuning in and you are you're a banker and you work in a bank, then you will know that every single country actually has a bank account, right, for settlement up in New York, right? And effectively, they, in the past, right, this has caused problems for countries, right, when they freeze your settlement account, because that means you're unable to do settlement, you're unable to do global commerce. And that's happened to a small country called Malta. It's happened before when I don't remember when, but it's happened before when their accounts were frozen, and it wreaked havoc on their economy, right? And so the prime minister had to fly in to New York to plead with them and settle it. So, okay, so if you then look at this chart on the right, it shows that the US actually spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, right? So on the right in red, that's the US's spending on defense, 732 billion. Now, the rest of the countries, we're talking China, India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, France, Germany, UK, Japan, South Korea, and Brazil. Combined, they spend about 726 billion. So combined, they spend still less than the US spends. Now, some would interpret it how you would. Some might call it gunboat diplomacy. Some might say that, hey, look, because we are the reserve currency of the world, we need to have the military backing to protect that, right? Because that's very important. Okay, so let's talk about the birth of money. In 1000 BC, right, the birth of money. So in 1000 BC, more sophisticated civilizations began using bronze and copper weapon replicas for payments. So as you can see here, this is China's knife money, right? These were among one of the earliest monetary systems, right? It was shaped in a certain way, and therefore that made them fungible, right? One knife money compared to the next knife money was totally interchangeable. It didn't matter. It was worth the same. And so they were able to use that as money, right, in exchange for goods and services. So unlike spice, tea, or chicken, weapon replicas were fungible, right? And they could be exchanged for another similar replica. Now, the success of weapon replicas as currency led to the development of coins around 600 BC. Okay, so from weight, like from determining how much the money was worth from weight to how it looked, right, to minting it. So as you can see, so at first, the value of coins was based on how heavy it was, but they realized over time that it was really an expensive way to determine the value of the coin, because you needed to have special equipment to weigh the coins. You needed to have special, I suppose, some skill, right, to sort of weigh how much the coin was worth. And so they then introduced minting. As you can see at the bottom left here, that's the bronze mold for minting what they call the Banliang coins, right? Circa 475 to 221 BC in China. And then on the right, this is the US mint dies, right, used to mint new coins. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So banknotes, right, are actually cheaper to produce, and it's a lot, a lot easier to transport. Now it's cheaper because, well, you just do it on a piece of paper, right? And it's not as heavy, so you could fold it, right, and stick it in your pocket or put it in your bag, and it's much easier to transport. And you could transport much larger values. So if you've heard of Marco Polo, He is the famous Venetian merchant, right? Now he introduced China's inventions to Europe, like the gunpowder and the like the um, gunpowder and a lot of other stuff, right? That came from China. Now he introduced a lot of China's inventions to Europe in 1296, but it was centuries before the Bank of Stockholm would issue Europe's first banknotes. So at first, banknotes were fully backed by gold and silver in its vaults, in the bank's vaults. But soon, the banks began printing more notes and lending them out, regardless of how much gold or silver they had in their vaults. So they got a little bit greedy, right? They got a little bit greedy, and they thought, "Hey, look, we're gonna learn." They trust us. They trust us anyway, right? So we can issue more notes. We can lend them out. We're gonna charge them interest, and we're gonna earn more interest, right? Who's gonna check our vaults anyway? Like, we've got full control of our vaults. And so, for those bankers, earning interest was a great incentive to print those extra banknotes, even though they didn't have the amount represented in gold and silver. So that was also why banknotes became more popular, right? That was what propagated it. Now, according to the Federal Reserve, the cost to produce a $1 coin costs around 33 cents, 6 times more than it costs them to produce a $1 banknote. Right. So for them to print a $1 banknote, the U.S. Federal Reserve's cost is about 5.2 cents. Much cheaper way to do it than producing the coin. Okay, so we estimate that global governments spend around $90 billion a year to print new banknotes. Right, so global banknotes issuance, they near about $200 billion a year. Right, so the market for commercial banknotes printing was worth around 10 billion, right, in 2018, according to Smithers, a US-based research firm, and 11% of the world's banknotes were actually printed by commercial printers in 2018. So what about the other 89%? Right. Well, the other 89%, basically each central bank will print their own banknotes. Right. So about 11% of those were printed commercially by commercial printers, but most central banks will want to print their own banknotes because to them it's an issue of national security. Right. Okay. So money printing has declined, right, in the past decade. So if you follow this chart, you see that money printing, or the amount of money being printed, like physical money, right, physical cash notes, they've declined over the past decade. But so bank notes in circulation may be increasing, but today's physical cash, right, make up only 6% of all money in existence. Now, obviously, so there's an interesting comment here from Ahmad Azim. He says nowadays, we all go cashless, right? That means, well, it'll still cost them some cost, but it's probably even cheaper than printing stuff. It'll still cost them, the systems cost and all that. But yeah, it's probably more efficient and cheaper. So yeah, so So banknotes in circulation may be increasing, but the physical cash, the money, the notes, right? That's only about 6% of all money in existence. So it's quite little, right? So most money now actually sit on digital ledgers, and when we read from the Fed or some other central banks in printing money, most of the time, money, there's no real money that's printed. It's created, with a push of the button on the keyboard, right? And it's created. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying, but yes, that's basically it. So, next slide. Oh yeah, no. I've already shown this one. And yes, obviously, yes, Ilbeth Lim, yes, the multiplier factor, right? Obviously. So this is for those of you who are unaware. You put your money into fixed deposit and they pay you an interest rate, right? So for every dollar, for example, that you put into the bank can lend out $11, right? So therefore new money gets created as well. Okay, so then obviously cash made a comeback last year in 2020. And for those of you who this cash as in right, the demand for cash, right, because of the coronavirus, has helped propped up its currency division, says the De La Rue. De La Rue is one of the commercial printers. On a side note, right, do you know that all US dollars in circulation right now, all US dollars that are in existence today, around 30% of it was created in the last 12 months, right? Because of the pandemic. So yes, 1/3, right? Almost 1/3. So around 30% of all US dollars in existence today was created in the last 12 months. And that was, as a monetary policy, by the Federal Reserve in order to address the current situation, right? To keep the economy afloat and to help its citizens. So that also explains why the capital markets have been going crazy, and also others looking into alternative assets like Bitcoin to hedge their bets because of the devaluation of the currency, because of the inflation of the money supply, right? Okay, so that was that. Now, but obviously, cash is no longer king, right? Because you always hear this, oh, cash is king, cash is king. But anyway, so banknotes and coins now make up, just 9% of the total value of payments, right, in the United States. Now, value, right? So of all the value that's been transacted, physical cash only makes up about 9%. So, but cash is used to make 26%. So I'm talking volume now, of all payments transactions in the US, right? Interesting comment by Beth Lim here. Okay, so right now, so again, value and volume, right? So in terms of value, 9% of it was used in cash, and in terms of volume, about 26% of all payment transactions was cash, right? Then obviously you've got cash, you've got checks, mobiles, you have credit cards, debit card, and prepaid cards, right? And the bright green will be the electronic, whether it's e-transfer or stuff like PayPal or Venmo, right? Okay. So this is where you see that the 9% of the value of transfer was done in cash. Now, a large part of it was actually done electronically, right? So almost 38%, 34%, 32%, right? So you can see that there's a pretty clear trend. Look, the credit cards and the debit cards remain pretty consistent here, but you can see this growth in electronic payment. Okay. So let's talk about electronic payments. Now, before credit cards existed, Western Union was king. So any time that you wanted to transfer money from one place to another, from a person to another person, that you couldn't physically go up to and hand them the cash, you would obviously have to use, Western Union, right? And so Western Union was, I think if I have my history right, Western Union was a telegraph company, and they evolved into this payment system business, right? Or remittance business. But effectively, so before credit cards existed, the only way to send money quickly over long distances was through telegraphic transfer. And so, if you needed to send, you have, like, for example, in Malaysia, we have a lot of foreign workers. And if, the foreign workers, let's say that there was an emergency and they needed to transfer money back home to wherever they were from, they would have to go through the likes of a Western Union, and then pass them the money. And then on the other end, the family members would then pick it up and get the money. But obviously there was a transaction cost to that, right? To that money transfer. Okay. Now, those of you who don't know, but I think most of you know, the very first credit card, right, was actually a charge card. It's known as the Dynasty card, or Dynasty Club, right? And it was started because he realized he didn't have his wallet with him, and so he created the Dynasty Club card, right? As you can see here in the slide in 1949. So the Dynasty Club business model was very simple, right? So in order to generate revenue, they would take 7% of every card transaction. 7% is a lot of money, and members would have to pay $3 every year to get access to the card's services. So in just over a year, the Dynasty Club grew to 10,000 members, right? And that's pretty amazing. And merchants from about 28 restaurants and 2 hotels had signed up with Dynasty Club. So by 1959, Dynasty Club had 1 million club members, which is like massive growth. And it launched an IPO and listed itself on the NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange. Right, so that was the history of Dynasty Club. Now, soon the banks started to realize, hey, that's a very lucrative business model, right? There's lots to be had, lots of money to be made there. So 8 years later, in 1958, the Bank of America emerged with its own credit card, right? They called it the Bank AmeriCard. Now, uniquely, the Bank of America created a payment network by licensing its cards to other banks in the US, right? With that, the National Bank AmeriCard evolved from a credit card issuer into a payment network. Now, the concept of this payment network is very important, right? So within 2 years, 1 million Bank AmeriCard AmeriCards were now in circulation, right? So the payment network was an all important middle person because it allowed money to flow, right, between banks and merchants, right? It allowed it to flow because you now have this network, just like what the internet is, right? The internet allows this information to flow from, whether person to organizations or organizations to other organizations. So within the network, banks exchange payment information with each other, right? So the network cleared and settled payments. It provided security for payment transactions, and it settled disputes. So effectively, that's what it was. And if you're curious, if you look at this color here, does that remind you of anything? And if you guessed Visa, you'd be correct. So Bank AmeriCard is the Visa is Visa, right? They are Visa, right? And their ticker symbol is V. All right, Visa. Okay. So eventually technology delivered the breakthrough for payment systems, right? So by creating this payment networks, right, banks have found a way to scale the credit card business, right? They found a way to scale it. But before credit cards could truly go global, there was some catching up to do. Now, I don't know if you realize, right, till today, if you haven't checked, go and check again. Do you notice that your credit cards actually has that not embossed if you run your finger through it, you can actually feel the numbers, right? So it's embossed, right? Now, why is that? That's because if you're old enough, you remember this with credit cards. It wasn't always, tap and go. It wasn't always stick it in and key in your pin. Um, you used to have these machines there. So if you can see this is a credit card swiping machine. Literally, when they say swipe your card, right? You put your card down. There were carbon copies there, and the machine would go crook crook, right? And then you would have to sign on that piece, and they would give you a copy, a duplicate of the carbon copy. So this created an opportunity for fraud to happen, because all a scammer had to do was get a copy of that carbon copy, because it literally made all the important details on your credit card, right? It imprinted it. They just needed a copy of that to go and create a fake card, right, or a duplicate of that card, and then they could go around charging that card, and there'll be some gap between how much they've charged and taken the goods, between there and the Visa or a Bank America card noticing that, oh, hang on, you can't be at two places at the same time and charging it both at the same time, right? And so eventually it was, the so yeah so as I was mentioning, right? So as recent as the 1970s, these credit card transactions were more physical than digital, because of that system, right? That rolling, like that, of how they took your credit card details. So the imprinters had carbon copies, that as I mentioned, they could be stolen, and so there was billions in fraud every year. So effectively, they needed to fix that issue, right? So they fixed it by building a system, right? The electronic authorization systems came to be, and that effectively allowed it to solve that problem of fraud, right? Because now it was kind of real time. So the National Bank America and a rival group of banks, the Interbank Card Association, aka today's Mastercard, introduced bank electronic authorization systems, a messaging system that allowed merchants to transmit requests for transaction approval to banks. So effectively, what happens today, right? And every time you charge your card, you get an SMS, you get a text message that says, "Oh, okay, your card has just charged this. If you didn't charge it, call the bank, right? Call the bank and let them know." So in 1973, less than 2% of Americans had a card that permitted them to buy goods and services when not dealing with a local merchant. 10 years later, over 50% had such cards. Magnetic stripes, initially conceived to secure CIA identity cards, became the new way for credit cards to store important information. Terminals became the new way for credit card information to be transmitted fast and securely, right? So this Bank America card here, that's Visa. Now, this is what today's Visa net looks like. As you can see, this is a data center. That's some really expensive IBM machines there, and effectively, combining base 1 and base 2 Visa's electronic processing systems, VisaNet authorizes up to 65,000 transaction messages every second, right? So that's how the Visa network works today, right? Now, so Visa's system connects 46 million merchants, 15,900 financial institutions, and 3.3 billion cards around the world, right? So that's a data center, right? And that's effectively now VisaNet and a payment network, right? A payment system. So National Bank America card, like I said, is now known as Visa, and as you can see, as Visa's network grew, so did their stock, right? And it was in 1973, it was $103, so it's about $1, and it's grown 40 times to where. Oh, sorry, this was a 2006, right? It grew 40 times up to 2006, right? So effectively, credit card technology had evolved, but Visa and MasterCard still dominate, right? So now you got this duopoly. Visa and MasterCard's creation of networked electronic payment systems gave both firms a foothold in credit cards, right? A foothold that stands to this day. Okay, trillion-dollar toll operators. Now, if you didn't know, then this will be an interesting thing to share with you, right? For every $100 that you would charge on a credit card, right? The merchant gets around $97.25, right? And this is a breakdown of where the rest goes, right? So the issuing bank, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say we go to Shell, right, to fill up with petrol, and I have a CIMB card, right? So the CIMB card would be the issuing bank, right? So and let's say you have perhaps Maybank that the petrol station uses, right? So they would be the acquiring bank. And then the payment processor could be we use, so for example, let's just say for argument's sake they use Stripe, right? Stripe is the payment processor. So CIMB Bank would get 220, Stripe gets 23 cents, the Maybank gets 19 cents, and the card network, which is Visa, will then get 13 cents, right? So effectively Shell will get 97.25, right? And that's kind of how a transaction works, right? Okay, so yeah, so this is a headline taken from the New York Times, right? I'll just read it out to you. A dollar is no longer a dollar in this country, says Mallory Duncan, Senior Vice President of the National Retail Federation, a trade association. It's a Visa dollar. It's only worth 99 cents because they take a piece of everyone. So they take, so effectively they are toll gate operators, right, in the financial network. For every transaction that goes through, they'll take a percentage of it. So every year, payments companies like Visa and MasterCard and financial, they earn a lot of Visa dollars, right? Equivalent to almost $2 trillion in revenue. That's a lot of money, $2 trillion. Now, for perspective, the total GDP of the bottom 116 countries in the world, their total combined GDP is 1.86 trillion. So Visa, and all the other payments companies, they earn more than more than the bottom 116 companies. So combined, Visa and MasterCard are worth about $807 billion, right? So the red one is MasterCard and Visa is the one in blue, right? So so Visa's market cap is about 452 billion, and MasterCard's about 355 billion. So combined, they're about 807 billion. So in today's world, e-wallets expected to generate 47% of e-commerce payments by 2022, right? So the expectation is that as we get more mobile, the form of electronic payment is going to evolve, right? And it looks to be e-wallets that are the flavor of the month. So with that being said, big tech wants a cut too. I mean, it's a very lucrative market. Why wouldn't you want a cut? I mean, if Visa and MasterCard didn't do it, well, Apple wants to do it. Facebook wants to do it. Amazon wants to do it. Google wants to do it, right? Alibaba. So, if you look at big tech, so you've got Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, Visa, JP Morgan, right? They all want to do it. So the network effect makes payments a difficult industry to break into, right? So payments are not just about acts of extinguishing a debt. They are an exchange, an interaction between people, a fundamentally social experience. If two people use the same payment method, a third is more likely to join. So now we're talking about networks, right? The network effect, if you've heard of that. So this was said by, this was a quote from Tobias Adrian and Tommaso Marcini Grifoli from the IMF, The Rise of Digital Money. Okay. So thanks to the network effect, the biggest payment processor leaves all others in the dust. So if you look at that, the blue is Visa, and they have about 44 to 45% of the market. And MasterCard has almost a quarter of the market. So combined, they have about 3/4 of the market almost, right? Union Pay is China, so that's pretty large as well. They have just over a quarter, 26.66%. Then you've got JCB, which is American, and the American Express, which is 3.2%. Dynasty Club is less than 1%, right? So what happens then to the smaller players, right? Like Dynasty Club. So the Dynasty Club is now owned by Discover Financial Services, which bought it from Citigroup in 2008 for 165 million. So they're worth a lot less. In China, Tencent and Ant Financial, they're the market leaders. They now have over 1 billion users each. So there has to, all this is fantastic. It's great, right? If we live in the modern world that we do. And, in Malaysia, we're quite lucky, right? Because we have access to all these financial services. But there is a dark side to these modern payments, right? And that is 1.7 billion adults globally remain outside this financial system, right? With no access to a traditional bank. Most of the unbanked are in the poorest 40% of households, and that is true. Many are from developing or underdeveloped economies, right? So if you look at it, you look at this map, right? So the smallest dot is 1 million, then 10 million, 100 million, 200 million, and you can see where those dots exist, right? Now, it's quite surprising because if you look at Australia, there's no dot. That means they have access to traditional banking, right? They have easy access to it. There's a little dot here in Malaysia, right? And I assume those are probably from the lower socioeconomic rung of the economic ladder, and that there are others around the world, right? So that's the dark side of it. So according to the United Nations, bank charges an average of 11% per remittance, right? So in 2017, $466 billion was sent to households in low and middle income countries. 466 billion, that's a lot of money. At an average cost of 7.1% per remittance. That implies over $40 billion in transaction costs. That's, already they're in the lower rung of, the socioeconomic ladder. And for them to pay even higher fees than normal in order to transmit money home so that their loved ones can actually get access to the money that they're working so hard for, and they have to be apart from their families from. So it's pretty high cost, right? To be paying just for remittance. So payments are much easier, faster, and safer when they were 100 years ago, right? But many of those who need it the most seem to be locked out of the modern payment system. And here's an interesting one. Okay, so people who have gone abroad to flee Venezuela's disastrous economy are sending back rising amounts of dollars. Now, as you all know, Venezuela has been locked out of the global monetary system, right? So transferring of money to Venezuela and out of Venezuela is very difficult because I suppose they're not allowed to use the SWIFT system, right? And the SWIFT system is the well, effectively, it's a messaging system, right, between banks around the world. But they're locked out of it, right? So they're not welcome, so they can't use it. And so a lot of Venezuelans have actually left the country and they work overseas. But, obviously they still have family back home in Venezuela that they want to then send money to. And so more and more Venezuelans are sending money back home to their families because if you have been following the news, life is tough, right? It's pretty difficult, and it's difficult to sort of so to have a family member overseas who is sending money back. Look, that'll be great help. However, new laws force Venezuelans to go through local banks for foreign transactions and require banks to disclose information on how individuals get and use their money. So almost a police state like, right? According to Alejandro Mercado, a cryptocurrency researcher at the Open Money Initiative, a wire transfer from the United States can now encounter a fee as high as 56% as it passes from dollars to bolivars in a process that can last several weeks. So can you imagine that, right? A family member has an emergency, they need to pay for hospital bills or whatever. And so, their son or daughter who's working overseas sends money, across, right, the wire to reach them on time so that they can pay for the hospital bills. 56%. So if you send $100, right, $56 will be taxed away, right? Because those are the bank fees, and only $46 actually end up with the family. And to make it worse, the entire process can take a few weeks or several weeks to process, right? So most recently, Venezuelan banks have, under pressure from the government, even prevented clients using foreign IP addresses from accessing their online accounts. So you can see, right? This is tough, and humans being humans, they try to find, if there's something in their way, they obviously try to sort of find solutions to it. So some merchants and consumers have accused credit card networks of charging expensive fees. And so, this is in the UK, where MasterCard was sued for charging too much fees. And then this was in the Michigan Retail Association against settlement for Visa and MasterCard class action suit, again, of charging too much fees, right? And so they chose to settle, right? So here comes an emergence of a new kind of payment system, right? That is Bitcoin. So let's talk about Western Union versus Bitcoin, right? So Western Union completed 268 million customer-to-customer transfers in 2016 with a value of $80 billion. So total revenue for that year exceeded $5 billion. So Western Union recorded a net profit of $250 million. In 2019, right, the median, now this is 2019, not now, right? Now it's a little bit different, but in 2019, the median number of Bitcoin transactions were 370,383 per day. And based on this figure, we estimate 135 million Bitcoin transactions took place last year, right? The previous year, which is 2018. So based on the average Bitcoin transaction fees of 71 cents in 2019, this works out to about $96.27 million in transaction fees. Now, mind you, today, because the transaction volumes are much higher, and obviously the price of Bitcoin is much higher, the transaction fees are also much higher. So the average transaction fee on the Bitcoin network today, as is around 13 to 15 US dollars, right? Which is much, much higher. But back in 2018 and 2019, where it was, everything was lower, the price of Bitcoin was lower, the transaction volumes were lower, and therefore fees were much lower. That's what it worked out to be. So assuming that Bitcoin was called for all these 268, was used for the 268 million Western Union transactions in 2016, transactions would have cost less than $200 million, right? Or 4% of what Western Union of what Western Union's revenue was, right? Because Western Union was revenue of $5 billion. They would have saved 96%. Right. Now, this is all part of the plan by Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, right? So Satoshi Nakamoto envisioned that by removing the need for payments to go through trusted third parties, transaction costs could drop significantly, right? And so this is effectively how the a Bitcoin transaction would work, right? So from here you can see, so someone would send request a transaction. The transaction is then broadcasted, right, on the blockchain. So this is peer-to-peer networks, peer-to-peer computers. The miners would, so you hear about Bitcoin mining. So the miners would verify that transaction, and then the transaction would then be written onto a block, right, the data block, and the new block is then added to the existing blockchain, right? And then your transaction is complete. So that's how a Bitcoin transaction works. So today, an entire industry has developed around Bitcoin, right? It's grown up around Bitcoin. So if you think about it, you have the hardware suppliers, you have the mining people who the guys who mine, and then you have the trading and the payment players, so guys like Coinbase, Bitfinex, Huobi, and then you have the payment gateways like BitPay, CoinGate, right, and so on and so forth. So Bitcoin miners Cypher is gonna now there's a trend, right, from last year and this year as well, that a lot of these Bitcoin miners are actually getting listed. They're becoming publicly listed or publicly traded companies. So there's a Bitcoin miner, Cypher Inc., and they will go public via $2 billion SPAC merger. So more than $4 billion of crypto mining machines are sold each year. So every year, more than $4 billion of equipment are sold, right? And these are known as ASIC machines. So these are application-specific integrated circuits. So it does one thing and one thing only, and it does it really well and really fast. And each of these mining rigs, these ASIC machines, will consume the power. If we're talking Bitcoin, will consume the power of a 1.5 horse to 2 horsepower AC aircon, right? And imagine running 50 of those or 500 of those 24/7. Yeah, your power bills are definitely going to add up. But you see that the cost of running it actually increases the security of the network, which then increases increases the security of the network, which then gives one the confidence to use it as a payment network, as a value transfer network, right? Okay, so the business model of Bitcoin miners, there's the power source, right? Whether it's electricity, which powers the mining equipment, and obviously the miners will then have to pay for the electricity costs. There's a lot of computing power that is then used, which then powers or secures the Bitcoin network, and then transaction fees are collected for running, to be a miner, and also the new Bitcoins that are minted are then awarded to the miners, right? Then obviously the Bitcoin network will process the transaction. It then assigns who gets the new rewards, and so annual Bitcoin mining network revenue by 2025 is estimated to be between 13 billion to 25 over billion dollars, right? And so the Bitcoin mining dynamics, I'll just read out a few points. data center revenue consists of a reward for the block mine and a transaction fee. So effectively, if you're a Bitcoin miner, you have two revenue sources. One is from the newly minted Bitcoin, and the other is from processing the transaction. So when you process a transaction, what you do is you take a collection of these transactions and you write it onto the blockchain, right? You create the block and you attach it to the blockchain, and for doing that, you charge a transaction fee based on the bitcoins that are transferred. And so these two revenue streams will be what the Bitcoin miner looks for. And in terms of its value chain, well, then it needs computer equipment, and it needs to pay for the electricity that the equipment consumes in order to secure the network. Okay. Average block size is 10 minutes for Bitcoin. The block reward is based on the rate. This one gets a bit more complicated, so I'll probably skip that. But effectively, think about this, right? If you were Venezuelan and your family needed money and they needed money fast, wouldn't it make more sense for them to try to send Bitcoin instead of going through the Venezuelan banks? Now, I'm not advocating anything. I'm just saying that there's an emergency, there's a problem, and someone else came out with a solution in order to transfer money back home to their family because for whatever reason, for emergency purposes, and they could bypass the issue of the slowness and the extremely expensive processing fee of 56%. Right. So and I'm pretty sure, look, if you were to send $20, but based on today's price, today's transaction cost using the Bitcoin network, the transaction fee is going to be $13. Well, then obviously that's too expensive. But if you were to send $1,000 and it was still $13, then the relatively the transaction fee is much lower compared to having to pay that 56%, right, of a transaction cost using the Venezuelan banks. So since 2013, miners have invested almost $18 billion into the Bitcoin network, right? That's a lot of money to put into mining equipment. Not only mining equipment, but they have to pay for electricity costs, the upkeep of the facilities. They need to hire engineers to maintain the facilities, and also to maintain the miner, the mining equipment, right? Yeah. So they've taken the most financial risk to sustain the network, right? So they're almost seen as betting on Bitcoin, while receiving 19 billion in mining fees and block rewards. So see, they've spent 18 to receive 19, right? But mind you, right? This calculation was published in November 2020, so last year, when the price of Bitcoin was 18,000. So it's almost 60,000 now, right? So it is 3x more. And so if you look at then the block rewards, if they were able to hold on to the Bitcoin and not sell it at the price back then, they would be 300% better off today, right? So if there's some way for the Bitcoin miners to financing it through other means, they'd be 300% up today if they were able to hang on to Bitcoins instead of selling the Bitcoins to finance the operations, right? So something to understand. So we think that Bitcoin miners are obviously betting on Bitcoin's price to be much higher than what it is today, right? And this was taken from ARK Invest. Basically, the potential price increase per Bitcoin if Bitcoin were to replace cash on S&P 500's corporate balance sheet of 0.1%, by 1%, or 10%, right, of all the Bitcoin replacing cash in the S&P 500's books. The other model or hypothetical that was that's presented here is the hypothetical impact of institutional investment on the price of Bitcoin. So high net worth individuals, insurance companies, mass affluent, sovereign wealth funds, and pension funds. So if 1% allocation were made on this group of people's portfolio, then Bitcoin would be at about 100,000 or just under 100,000. If 2.55% allocation were allocated, then it would be at about 200,000. If 6.55% were to be allocated, then the model says that it should be at $500,000, right, from this group of people. So that's that was taken from ARK Invest, right? So obviously they're betting on Bitcoin's price being higher, right? And so at current Bitcoin prices, miners can generate up to $5 billion a year from transaction fees in 2025. So as you can see, as the market cap goes up, or as and the percentage of the transaction fees would go up, right? As the price of Bitcoin increases. So which means for a miner as a business model, not only, they're betting that the price of Bitcoin should go up, because as it goes up, and if they can have the ability to hold on to the Bitcoin and find another way to pay for their operating expenses, then obviously what they hold on to should sort of go up as well, as we've seen. But also the fact that because of the mining rewards coming down, right? So newly minted Bitcoins will be reduced every halving. The price of Bitcoin has to go up because then that compensates for their revenue through transaction costs, right? Yeah. Okay, so Satoshi Nakamoto's intelligent design not only drives the network, but it actually provides for strong financial incentives for miners to keep Bitcoin alive, even as new Bitcoin production slows to a crawl. So as you know, there are these events in Bitcoin called halvings, right? So every 210,000 blocks of 10 minutes each, or approximately every 4 years, the production of or the newly minted Bitcoins that get created and sent out or given to the miners will be halved. So right now we're in the third halving, where every block that gets created, you get 6.25 newly minted Bitcoins. Now by 2024, 3 years from now, that amount's gonna half, right? But by then, I suppose the hypothesis is that the price of Bitcoin should be higher, and this is not financial advice, in order to sustain it, right? So the system has been designed in such a way where miners are incentivized to keep Bitcoin alive, to continue to secure the network, because as you get less Bitcoins, the price should go up because the adoption rate should increase, right? And yeah, so I think so it ensures that Bitcoin survives for decades to come. And if you look at all the different halvings, as of now in circulation, of the 21 million Bitcoin, for those of you who are not aware, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. There's about 18.6 million of that already in circulation, right? So it's already in circulation, and it's being held by people, right? Now, the other 2.5 or 2.4 million Bitcoins that is meant to be minted through this mining process will take another 120 years, right? So by 2140 is when we will hit that the 21 million Bitcoin that gets released in the system, because of how this halving works. Okay. So expected increasing importance of transaction fees. So the strong ability to capture transaction fees. So projected revenue is earned from both the block reward. So these are newly minted Bitcoins that are talked about here, and the transaction fees. So as the total number of Bitcoin available to mine declines over time because of this halving, the transaction fees will become the main incentive drivers for miners. So as use of the Bitcoin network expands, cipher mining will be well positioned to command an increasing portion of the network fees. So effectively, this company, Cipher Mining, that we mentioned that is going public through a SPAC, they are building more and more and more Bitcoin mining farms. So for Cipher Mining, the percentage of revenue expected to come from transaction fees increases from 7% in 2021, this year, to 40% in 2025 for the base case. And that's reflected here, right? You can see that, okay, so this is 2021. So if you look at 2022, and you look at the dark one, which is the revenue from transaction fees, so you got 3, 7, 13, and 4 million. So if you add them up, it should be 37 million, right? So by 2025, right, and they see the expectation is that their fees will be around 400 million in 2025, right? And so the expectation is that the fees will play a significant part of the revenue model. So this is the base case of Bitcoin to 50,000, right? So Bitcoin's already at 60,000 now. Okay, so I think we're at the last slide here. Okay, basically the Bitcoin market cap, there's a premium, right? So if you look, it's over $1 trillion. So it is a $1 trillion asset. And if you look at it, it is not just a payment system, right? Because if you were to add Visa and MasterCard, it was at 800 and something billion, right? But Bitcoin is at a $1 trillion, and you're saying, well, hang on, Bitcoin can't even get close to how much Visa is processing. Well, that's because Bitcoin isn't just a payment system. Yes, on the white paper, it says it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. But right now, it is also perceived very much so as a scarce asset. And it is being recognized by many institutional investors, as well as those who used to say that Bitcoin was a fraud, it was a Ponzi scheme, it was a all those things. These financial institutions are actually coming in, right? So you got the JP Morgans of the world, you got the Morgan Stanleys of the world, who are now opening it up and allowing their customers, right, their high net worth and sophisticated, or what you call sophisticated customers, to now gain access into this. So they also view it as, besides a payment network, it is also viewed as a store of wealth, right? And so that's probably what that premium is, right? Obviously, Ethereum is also there at 223 billion, right? And so I think, yeah. So I think that's the last slide, and that concludes tonight's presentation. So I hope you have seen how the evolution of money has occurred, right? And what's interesting is that bartering still exists, right? And throughout history, these are issues that humans have encountered, so many generations, and it is just, if anything, it's just humans finding ways to overcome a problem, right? If a problem exists, then the humans will figure out a solution to that problem. And so right now, there will always, as long as humans exist, there will always be problems, and there will always be solutions to these problems. And so Bitcoin is a solution to some of these problems, and you can see what those solutions, what problems it solves, right? And it may not affect us directly today, because we're quite lucky in Malaysia, right? We have a strong financial system. We've got good regulators. We have good regulations in place, and so there may not be that need to solve some of those problems, because those aren't problems, right? But in other parts of the world, there are these problems, and therefore these are the solutions that have been come up, that have been invented to overcome these issues. And therefore I if anything, I think it's a very exciting time to be alive. There are so many things that's happening right now in the capital markets, and in central banks. The Federal Reserve, their latest sort of money printing exercise has created an additional $1.9 trillion. The ECB the other day announced that they would be printing another 1.8 trillion euros, and they will continue to print as much as is required to sustain the economy, to prop up the economy. And they've given themselves up to March next year, March 2022. However, um, they said that they will only stop when they deem necessary. So if it needs to go past March next year, they will continue printing. And so what you are seeing right now is that a lot of these institutional and professional fund managers who are, tasked with managing money of, say, pension funds, managing money for, companies, and managing money for individuals, whether high net worth or even just the average Joe on the street. Their task is to protect and grow this wealth, right? And protect, right? Protect being a key word here, so that these are pension funds, right? These are for people to retire on when they have no more active income. So they need to then draw on these funds in order to sustain their lifestyles to the end of their days. And so these fund managers are tasked with protecting these funds. And with with the current environment, they potentially see the devaluation of certain currencies, right? Or certain economies. And so therefore, some of them have taken the step to hedge their bets, right? To hedge their risk by putting an allocation or a percentage of their investment portfolio into the likes of Bitcoin, right? Paul Tudor Jones have done it. I think Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan advise, it's okay to put 1 to 3% of your portfolio in there. And then recently, a pension fund from New Zealand has done the same. An insurance firm called the Massachusetts one, Mass Mutual, they've put in $100 million. They bought $100 million worth of Bitcoin and put that into their portfolio. So you see these moves happening now, and you sort of have to dig a bit deeper to figure out why are they doing this. Anyway, I think I've gone past my time. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you're able to gain a better understanding of where we are today. Please continue to to visit us and come on Future Proof every Thursday night. We start at 8 p.m. And don't forget, like I said, like if you are planning to diversify your own portfolio into crypto, invest in yourself first, right? Like come for class. Like we're having classes soon. And if you are interested in classes, please just type in class in the comment section. Someone will try to get in touch with you. And with that, I bid you stay safe and have a great evening. All right. Good night, guys. Bye.